Hi, and good day. I'm Eric Coleman. I'm the state senator from the Second Senatorial District here in the state of Connecticut. And probably more importantly, I am the host of this program, the Senate Reports. And I want to welcome you, the viewer, to another edition of the Senate Reports. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what's going on at the Connecticut General Assembly. Those of you who are familiar with the legislature in the state of Connecticut know that we're coming down home stretch and there's less than a week left to the session. We close the session on June 3rd, which is next Wednesday. And there's still a fair amount of work to be done. I want to focus some of this edition's discussion on one of the organizations that I belong to. I am a member of the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. It's an organization that has existed for a few decades now, but it is comprised of all of the African American and Latino legislators who are members of the Connecticut General Assembly. From previous discussions, you'll probably recall that in the Connecticut legislature, there are a total of 187 members, and that includes 36 state senators and 151 members of the House of Representatives. The Black and Puerto Rican Caucus is comprised of 27 members, which is not a lot, all things considered, but historically, 27 members marks an amount of progress which is noteworthy. And I say that because I'm familiar with the history of the organization. As a matter of fact, I served as an intern at the state Senate for former state Senator Sanford Cloud. And it was during the time that I served as an intern to Senator Cloud, which was about 1971, that the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus was established. As a matter of fact, it was established as the Black Caucus, the Connecticut Legislative Black Caucus. At that point in time, there were no Puerto Rican members in the Connecticut General Assembly. And there were only about 7 African American members in the Connecticut General Assembly. And so I say that 27 members, the current total, represents some marked progress in terms of our membership, not only our membership, but also our influence in the goings-on at the state capitol and in the state of Connecticut. I wanted to just acquaint the viewers with the members of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, the current members. I would say that reciting a little bit more history, the first chairman of the Connecticut Black Caucus was State Representative Clyde Billington, who represented a district in Hartford, Connecticut. And not a lot has changed in terms of geography. Most of the representation of Blacks and Latinos comes out of the urban centers in the state of Connecticut. That would be New Haven, Hartford, and Bridgeport. And some of the next tier municipalities, some of the next largest cities, including Stamford and Waterbury and New Britain and New London. That's where most of the membership comes from, and that's historically been the case. As things stand right now, the current chair of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus is State Representative Bruce Morris. He comes from Norwalk, Connecticut. He represents Norwalk, Connecticut. The vice chair is Hilda Santiago, and Representative Santiago represents Meriden, Connecticut. And then we have members from Hartford include Representative Minnie Gonzalez, Representative Ed Vargas, Representative Douglas McCrory, Representative Angel Arce, Representative Brandon McGee, and myself, State Senator Eric Coleman. So that's about 6 legislators coming from the Hartford area, and that's a total, out of a total of 8 legislators that represent the city of Hartford. Senator John Fonfara represents the south end of Hartford in the Senate, and Representative Matt Ritter represents the west end of Hartford. So the total number of members in the Hartford legislative delegation is 8, and of that 8, 6 of the members are Black or Puerto Rican. And then New Haven sends, 4 African American and Latino representatives to the state legislature. And they include Representative Tony Walker, who is an important person in the policy making of the state of Connecticut. She happens to be the co-chair of the Appropriations Committee, which is the committee which is primarily responsible for establishing and developing the biennial budget for the state of Connecticut. She is from New Haven. Senator Gary Winfield has served in the Senate for about going on 3 years. He succeeded, some of you will remember, Senator Toni Harp, who left the Senate to become the mayor of New Haven, and she's currently working in that position and doing good things for the city of New Haven. So Senator Winfield is part of the New Haven legislative delegation, as is Representative Juan Candelaria, who also represents New Haven, and a relatively new legislator, Representative Robin Porter. She took over the seat in the district that was vacated by now Senator Winfield. Previous to serving in the Senate, Senator Winfield served as a state representative in the House of Representatives here in Connecticut. So when he succeeded to the Senate position, Representative Porter replaced him in the House of Representatives. So that's 4 Black and Puerto Rican members hailing from the city of New Haven. Bridgeport is actually the largest city in the state of Connecticut, at least based on population. And they actually send 2 state senators to the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus and to the Connecticut General Assembly. Hartford as well has 2 state senators, only one of which is a member of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. New Haven as well has 2 state senators, only one of which is African American. But Bridgeport sends 2 state senators to the Connecticut General Assembly, and both of those individuals are African American. Ed Gomes is the state senator representing, I believe, the 23rd Senatorial District, and Marilyn Moore is also a state senator from Bridgeport. She represents the 22nd Senatorial District. In addition to the 2 state senators, Bridgeport representatives include Charlie Stallworth, I should say Reverend Charlie Stallworth, Ezekiel Santiago, and Andre Baker. So Bridgeport sends a total of 5 African American and Latino legislators to the Connecticut General Assembly. So I mentioned the next tier cities: New London, Waterbury, New Britain, Stamford, and there is representation from those cities. Ernie Hewitt is the state representative from New London. Larry Butler and Victor Cuevas are state representatives representing Waterbury. Pat Miller is a deputy speaker of the House of Representatives. She holds a position of importance. She represents Stamford, along with Terry Adams, who is a recently elected state representative. He's in the midst of serving his first term representing the city of Stamford. Robert Sanchez represents the town of New Britain. Jason Rojas represents the town of East Hartford. And I left out Chris Rosario. Chris Rosario is a newly elected first-term legislator. He represents the city of Bridgeport as well. So there are actually 6 individuals that go to the General Assembly representing the city of Bridgeport. And there's some interesting developments as far as the composition and membership of the caucus is concerned, because we have, for the very first time, an individual of Argentinian descent. Matt Lesser is a legislator. His mother, I believe, is Argentinian. And so by virtue of that, he is a member of the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. And we have some further, perhaps even more interesting developments. For the first time, we have Republicans, traditionally and historically, the membership of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus has been composed of just Democrats. As a matter of fact, there have been very few, if any, people of color who have served in the Connecticut General Assembly who were from the Republican Party. But we have 2 at the present moment, and Andre Baumgartner is a young fellow, freshman legislator from the New London Groton area, and Art Linares is Cuban. He represents an area in Litchfield County, and he is also a Republican. So for the first time in the history of the caucus, we have 2 members who are from the Republican Party. Another historical note, I happen to serve with many of the previous members of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. I had indicated in earlier comments that I was around when the caucus was established. But the first Latino legislator who served in the Connecticut General Assembly is a gentleman whom I've served with in the House of Representatives back in the early 80s. His name was Jose Lugo. We call him Joe. Joe Lugo was the first Latino legislator to serve in the Connecticut General Assembly. He served in the House of Representatives for a period of time. But the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus is comprised of 27 members at the current time. We are affiliated with the National Black Caucus of State Legislators, and we have been working on an agenda that includes 3 important priorities, which I will talk about in more detail, but those 3 priorities have to do with legislation seeking to address the excessive use of force by police officers in the state of Connecticut. Education is always a priority for the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, And we have legislation which we're working on to get passed that we feel will improve the educational system in the state of Connecticut. And finally, we are all very interested in economic development and trying to improve the economic foundation of our communities and for the businesses that operate within our community, as well as for job opportunities for the residents that reside in the communities that we represent. So that's a little bit about the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. We are coming up on a break, and we're going to take a break. When we come back, I will talk a little bit in more detail about this session's legislative priorities for the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. Stay with us.
Injuries, loss of income, medical bills, car repairs. What does it mean to you and your family? A law firm is not about one person. It's about a well-coordinated, synchronized legal team that understands you and tells your story. I'm attorney Jeffrey Dressler for Dressler Strickland, Injury Lawyers. Hablamos su idioma, and this is what we do. 24/7, 11/22. That's 24/7, 11/22.
Hello again, welcome back. This is Eric Coleman, your state senator from the Second Senatorial District here in the state of Connecticut, and your host of this program, the Senate Reports. During this segment of the Senate Reports, I'd like to talk a little bit about the legislative priorities for the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus. And we talked a little bit about in the previous segment about the membership of the caucus and a little bit about the history of that caucus. And so now I'd just like to touch upon some of the things that the caucus is pursuing in terms of legislation in this session of the Connecticut General Assembly. And the number one legislative priority for the caucus is a bill which we've developed to address the use of force by police officers in the state of Connecticut. And as you can imagine, that bill originates because of what has been happening all too frequently across the United States in mostly minority communities, communities of color, and that is unarmed individuals being shot to death by police officers for relatively petty transgressions. And I say transgressions because in many of the cases that have occurred that I think all viewers are by now familiar with, there wasn't even a crime being committed or in the progress of being committed. But yet and still, individuals have lost their life. And probably the most chilling of those incidents was the incident which took place in North Charlotte, South Carolina, where but for a private citizen having captured the incident on his cell phone video recorder, the reporting of that incident probably would have come out in quite a different way. But those of us who saw that cell phone video recording, we saw an individual, I believe his name was Walter Scott, turn and run away from a police officer who just calmly pulled out his pistol and took his time, took aim, and fired 8 shots. It had to be into the back of Mr. Scott, who died from those wounds. And I think the significance of the video recording is that the police officer's report, as typically is the case, seemed to indicate that he was feeling threatened by Mr. Scott and in fear of his life. The video recording shows something absolutely and totally different. It shows Mr. Scott fleeing the officer, running away from the officer. And the unfortunate part about the whole incident is that Mr. Scott was pulled over for an allegedly broken taillight. And as the story unfolds, Mr. Scott was concerned about a child support arrearage that he had, and didn't want that day to go to jail. And so he began running away, and the officer was in pursuit. And then things unfolded in the most tragic way, and the officer fired 8 shots at Mr. Scott and killed him. And this officer's actions seem all the more arrogant because it is in the wake of what occurred in Ferguson, Missouri, and what occurred in Staten Island, New York, and in Cleveland, Ohio, with the young Tamir Rice, and all of the controversy and brouhaha that surrounded those incidents. Even considering those incidents, this officer in North Charlotte, South Carolina, did what he did. And that's horrific. That is chilling and ought to be of concern to all of us. So we here in the state of Connecticut, in the Connecticut General Assembly, the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, have sponsored a bill to address the use of excessive force. We've had our own incidents where residents of the state of Connecticut who happen to be people of color have been killed by police officers. At least a couple of those incidents were not as nationally reported as, for example, Ferguson or North Charlotte or Staten Island, but they are of concern, obviously, in any event. And so our bill seeks to do about 7 things. And one is to require additional training for police officers in the state of Connecticut on the use of force, as well as cultural competency and sensitivity training, and as well as the emerging concept that's coming out of the Department of Justice and is being employed in places like Vermont. The concept is called bias-free policing. And so the bill requires training of Connecticut police officers at the local level and the state level, training in bias-free policing. Additionally, there is some emphasis in the bill on recruitment, and at least 3 areas are emphasized, and that is there needs to be a better relationship between many police departments and their officers and the communities that they are in place, in position to protect and serve. There is not a great trust level um, between the parties, and that needs to improve. And so we feel that we can perhaps kill two birds with one stone if we involve police officers in activities with young people, not just with police athletic league um, kinds of activities, but also in the establishment of explorer programs, cadet units, and public safety academies. And in that way, hopefully, police officers can acquaint young people with career, what it's like to serve as a police officer, and what a career in law enforcement is all about. And hopefully, at least a few of the youngsters that are mentored or coached and supported by police officers in the community will be attracted to themselves, become interested in becoming members of law enforcement. Additionally, I think a lot depends upon outreach. A lot concerning recruitment depends upon outreach. And so there's provision in the bill for advertising in minority communities and conducting educational, informational forums in community settings, and just making potential candidates for positions within the police department aware that there are certain opportunities that could be beneficial as far as concerns a career in law enforcement. And finally, as far as recruitment is concerned, in the tests that are conducted for police officers, especially in those communities here in the state of Connecticut where the composition of the police departments do not necessarily reflect the community that they serve, if the police department is underrepresented and so far as concerns people of color, then in the recruitment process and the hiring process, if there are candidates who are equal or nearly equal as far as qualifications are concerned as any of the other candidates, then those individuals from the community should be given preference to fill the vacancies at the entry level, and as well to fill vacancies insofar as concerns promotional opportunities within the department. The other important piece about the bill is that it requires police officers in the state of Connecticut, both state police officers and police officers from local departments. Doesn't require, but it provides the opportunity for those officers to be equipped with body cameras. And we made a probably tactical decision not to mandate the use of body cameras, but to provide some incentive for police departments to voluntarily adopt a policy requiring their officers to utilize body cameras. And we do this with an incentive grant program, so that for any departments that make the decision to equip their officers with body cameras prior to fiscal year ending 2017, those departments will receive a 100% reimbursement for the acquisition of the equipment, as well as 100% reimbursement for the cost of storage of the images that are created by the body cameras for the first year of that storage. And for those departments that voluntarily adopt the decision to have their officers be equipped with body cameras. If they make that decision prior to fiscal year ending 2018, then those departments will receive a 50% reimbursement for the cost of the cameras and 50% reimbursement for the cost of storing the images that are created from those body cameras. Additionally, the bill addresses on who investigates and prosecutes police officers who are involved with the discharge of their firearm, which discharge results in the death of an individual. The bill also requires that information regarding the use of force be collected. And the bill also makes it very clear that private citizens have the right to record the activities of police officers in the performance of their duties. And finally, which I think is a very important final provision, we know that not everybody is suited to serve as police officers. And unfortunately, there have been instances where people have violated the public trust. There needs to be some accountability in policing. And so those individuals who have been involved in fraudulent activities such as planting of evidence, conviction of a felony offense, and other instances of malfeasance would be dismissed from police work and would not be able to secure a position within the state of Connecticut for future work as a police officer. And as well, if they apply outside of the state of Connecticut for a position as police officers, the department from which they have been dismissed for malfeasance or serious misconduct would be required to notify the prospective new department where this candidate is seeking employment. This is the Connecticut Legislative Black and Puerto Rican Caucus's initiative, which seeks to address what has become a very critical and important issue, not only in the state of Connecticut, but nationwide. And the bill that we're supporting and advocating in behalf of is Senate Bill 1109. It will have to be passed in the Senate first and then the House of Representatives prior to next Wednesday. And we're all working feverishly in order to make that happen. Prospects look good. The bill has attracted a good deal of support, I'm pleased to report. And I think that'll do it for this segment of the Senate reports. We will probably pick up this discussion in a future episode or edition of the Senate reports. This is State Senator Eric Coleman from the Second Senatorial District here in the state of Connecticut, saying thank you for viewing this program, and I hope that you will view future programs. Thank you for joining us.